Now, back to more Sunday Morning Newsmakers.
Till Kahrs, also known as the Speak Doctor, has been a business communications consultant for over 25 years. He's a best-selling author and frequent guest on national TV, analyzing everything from presidential debates and giving communication skill tips. And he's consulted with over half of the Fortune 1000, helping companies and individuals improve their business communication skills. His best-selling book, Enhancing Your Presentation Skills, is a business classic, and it's now available as a Kindle ebook. He joins us right now, and we're going to talk about some of the things he shares when he visits businesses. Thanks so much, Till, for joining us.
Great to be with you, Larry. Thanks so much for having me.
I recently saw you on the KTLA Morning News in a segment that they flashed up kind of a topic of what not to say in the workplace, and that kind of caught my ear. We can talk about that and a few other things. What was that segment about?
Yeah, there's certain things that are really career killers, career suicide, if you will, 4 things that you shouldn't or should never say at work, and that's, the 4 things that we discussed there with that team. A lot of fun being on that show.
I came across the idea that you don't want to be negative. That can't be done. It won't work. That kind of thing. You shouldn't say that if you're in the workplace.
You really shouldn't. I mean, there's some things sometimes, let's be realistic, Larry, we're tasked with some really, really tough duties, but you have to remain very, very focused and very positive. Because think about this, if Steve Jobs said, we can't get all that stuff on the phone, or JFK said, well, I think we can go to the moon, maybe, or we'll try. People are looking for leaders, folks that are positive, and if you stay positive, you really have a chance to accomplish something. Henry Ford had a great quote. He said, if you think you can't, you're probably right. And that's just a great, great, great quote there to live by. You have to be positive, and that's what companies are looking for if you want to get ahead.
And that's up and down the line, both sides, whether you're labor or management. You really need to have that kind of attitude in this new economy because it's very competitive out there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Nobody wants a whiner or complainer. One of the other points I made on that show was that, you don't want to be somebody that says, oh, that's not fair, that's not fair. That makes you seem like a whiner or complainer. And we've all been exposed to things where sometimes, hey, life just isn't fair. My mom told me early on, life isn't fair. And by golly, we've all been there where something has gone off the track. But you have to remain positive. You have to have amnesia about those things. You have to move forward and just forget the past. You can control the future and stay in the present. Stay focused on what you can control. Let the past go.
Well, as the Speak Doctor, Till, you have worked with a lot of people to improve their presentation skills. I have read that public speaking is right up there with fear of death for a lot of people. Is that true?
Yeah, it's the number one fear people have, according to the Book of Lists, and a lot of other lists out there. And I can tell you, Larry, having worked with people for about 25 years on public speaking, it's amazing how many CEOs and CFOs, they have a lot of money, very successful, very well educated. But when it comes to public speaking, they just clam up, and it's just something they're not comfortable with. So it's a very, very important skill to have, and I think one of the reasons people are afraid of it is simply because, number one, they don't do it that often. Even if you're a natural or you're kind of a people person or you're the life of the party, how often do you actually make a speech in front of a lot of people unless you're a politician? Probably not that often. So the first problem is people don't do it that often. The second problem is you get hit with a surge of adrenaline. That never goes away. I mean, when I give a keynote speech in Las Vegas for a company, I'll have adrenaline running through my body, but I know how to dispense it. I know how to disperse that nervous energy through gestures, increasing my volume, that type of thing. And that's one of the things that I teach. You have to let that steam out of the pot, so to speak.
I remember back in high school when you had to make presentations, how much fun it was. I learned to get it over first, be one of the first people up there.
Yeah,
and
then get it out of the way, then laugh at everybody else, right?
But you're right. And do you tell people to prepare, or can you over-prepare a talk?
Well, here's the interesting thing in my industry relative to the public speaking side of it. People say, practice, practice, practice. Of course, know your subject matter. That can't hurt you. But practice alone won't help you. And here's why. You can rehearse all night, and all of a sudden, you step out on that stage and there's 500 people or 1,000 people out there. And if you've never done it before and you don't know how to control that adrenaline flow, it doesn't matter how much you've practiced, you're probably going to crash and burn. You have to really know exactly what to do and how to manage that adrenaline flow. That's really the key, Larry.
Are public speakers made, or are they natural, or is it a combination? What have you noticed over the years?
You know what I've really noticed, believe it or not, they're made. Now, there are a handful of people that really are naturals, and they just have this thing, what I call the X factor, but that's so few and far between, I wouldn't even worry about that. Even JFK, if you study him very closely in his early political career, and this is fascinating, he was not a very good public speaker. But he really came of age when he did that presidential debate in 1960 on television, which was kind of the birthplace of media skills and presentation skills from my perspective. But he practiced, and he was coached to do that.
I think of great communicators, at least in my lifetime, Ronald Reagan. I would say when Barack Obama is on a teleprompter, he's good. But off of it, he's very bad.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, and you mentioned two folks, I always like to talk about Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton because, just to be fair to the audience, no matter what side of the fence that you're on, two people known as the great communicator. And they both shared just great ability to talk deliberately, slowly, yet smile and slow down. And these are really kind of acting skills. Obviously, Ronald Reagan, who was a great communicator, king of the one-liner, had a lot of training there. Barack Obama is, he's pretty good. The interesting thing about him is he says and a lot, and that's almost his signature, which is kind of interesting, but for some reason he's able to pull that off. It's very strange, to be honest.
Yeah, I think back on some of the movies we've seen, whether it's a Woody Allen film where Woody Allen's up giving a speech and his mouth gets dry and he starts telling an inappropriate joke. I mean, there's things that can go very wrong, aren't there, when you get up and talk?
I love the fact that you mentioned humor because a lot of times people will give somebody a tip and say, hey, just open with a joke. Which, unless you're supremely confident and really funny, or you're Jerry Seinfeld or somebody like that, that can go straight down because sometimes your audience, and believe me, I speak a lot, I love to laugh and have a good time, but sometimes the audience, they don't want a joke or they don't want somebody to be funny. They want to get right down to business. And even the funniest of people, it's hard to be on all the time. So you're really rolling the dice if you open with a joke or humor. I always say, feel out your audience. If they're with you and you feel confident, then bring some humor in. And the last thing on humor, Larry, is the safest humor is self-deprecation in these politically correct times. Make fun of yourself. That's the easiest thing to do.
As we launch into this new year, give us something we can each take with us to improve wherever we are, whether it's communicating with family or employees to coworkers or their boss. What can we all learn today that we can just take with us from you?
The one thing I would tell everybody, and this is huge, and this has helped me in my consulting business, is listen. Listen first when you're communicating. So oftentimes we just do a data dump. We talk about ourselves. We talk about what's on our mind, whether we're in sales, whether we're managers. The audience, the people listening, Larry, are the most important thing. Let them have an opportunity to speak first before you say anything. You've got to get the order correct. And so many people, most people simply talk too much and they talk themselves right out of a sale or right out of a deal, or, right out of better communication. So be a better listener.
Is it a case sometimes where they're busy trying to think of the next thing to say, so their mind is lost on that rather than listening?
Yeah, there are two things you can do. You can play back information that you hear. So if somebody else tells you something, simply play back information so it'll give you a chance to think about what your next move is going to be, or ask an open-ended question to somebody who's maybe having trouble, to your point, not knowing what to say. Tell me more about your business. Tell me more about what your company does, just to use a generic example. And that's such a wide open question, Larry, that they'll be able to think of something and then pause. Let them take a moment to think about it so they can answer you back.
You talked earlier about the adrenaline. What about the dry mouth that happens? Or you just start to feel a little queasy when you speak in front of people. How do you address that?
Yeah, a couple things. As a former professional singer, it's going to sound kind of weird, but first of all, you want to drink a lot of liquids ahead of time, especially warm liquids, because that will loosen up your throat. Always have something close by, just in case you get a little bit of the dry mouth, just in case. but don't try to talk and drink liquids at the same time like Mark Rubio almost did in his rebuttal to the that Obama gave a couple of years ago.
Right, you see him with the glass of water.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because everybody remembers him holding that bottle of water, but they have no idea what he said.
Right. The other thing, too, I mean, in watching speeches, when the Texas governor gave that speech and he was going to list off the points and he couldn't remember the third point.
That's right.
That can be really tough, too.
Yeah, it can. So you have to have that stuff dialed in. Getting back to the dry mouth, as a professional singer, you can bite the tip of your tongue. And what that'll do, obviously you don't want to advertise that, but if your mouth is closed, nobody knows. What that does is actually shoot some extra lubricants back in your mouth. At the same time, breathe through your nose. That's what you need to do. And those are some singing tips that I have for you there that have served me well.
It's interesting when you go on stage or talk before people, the one thing I forget, because I'm usually in a studio, is when lights are on you, how it changes things. When a spotlight is on you, it's hard to see out there.
It really is, and it's interesting you mentioned that. I mentioned a musical career. I was a signed recording artist, and I played a couple of shows where the lights are so bright, you can't see anybody out there. If I've done a keynote speech, same thing. So what you really essentially do is you focus on what you think is one person, focus on them for a thought or a sentence, then move over to the other side of the room and look at one person. And you don't feel like you're looking at anybody, but the whole audience thinks, hey, you know what? Larry looked exactly right in my direction, which is the most important thing.
Till Kahrs, thanks so much. Our time is gone already. He is known as the Speak Doctor, and of course you can find out about his best-selling book, Enhancing Your Presentation Skills. It is a business classic, and where is it available? Amazon, things like that?
Amazon.com, yeah, and if you Google my name online, Till Kahrs, I've got a lot of stuff on YouTube, videos that are helpful, that type of thing.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Larry.
You've been listening to Sunday Morning Newsmakers, a program that covers the issues that impact the Southland. Send us an email with your comments to newsmakers@KRLA870.com. That's newsmakers@KRLA870.com. Sunday Morning Newsmakers with Larry Marino, AM870, The Answer.